Hey everyone, Road Breach here, and today we're taking a look at the Transformers Titans Return Decepticon Triplechangers. There are plenty of Triplechangers in Titans Return, but I figured I would take a look at Blitzwing, Astrotrain, and Octane. Why did I decide to look at these now? Well, because I was looking for something to upload, also because I have McFan's Toys, Astrotrain, and I have the other two shipping to me. So, let's take a look at Blitzwing first. This version of Blitzwing is noticeably beefier in the upper body. The arms being wider than his fists and the broad chest make him look far more studly than his original model. But it seems he skipped leg day because his legs are thinner than his arms. But beyond the proportions, there's lots of mechanical detail that I tried to pick out with some dry brushing. The head sculpt is pretty good, but the purple face is an odd choice when it's not like that in the show. These pylons on the side of his head are spring-loaded, and they move with his head, and turning our attention to the back, we can see that the backpack is pretty clean. For accessories, he comes with a sword and a gun, and you can take the tip of the turret and attach it to the gun. For articulation, the head has an impeded swivel with the pylons, which you can get more out of by putting them down. The arms can move forward that far and move back that far because they're blocked up here for some reason. They can move out that far. Bicep swivel, 90-degree elbows, nothing at the waist. Legs can move forward and back. He can do the splits. Thigh swivel, 90-degree knee bends, mafia knees, and you can use the tail wings to keep him stable. And because this is Titan's Return, the head can come off and turn into a smaller robot. The detail is pretty good, but the robot is unpainted. There is some articulation here, but this isn't dynamic. You can also take the headmaster and put it in the gun. As for the transformation, this is a pretty good process, but the leg panels shouldn't have been hinged on the inside because that's the one part that I don't like to do. The tank mode is that of an M1 Abrams, and it looks pretty good with a few flaws like the gap at the front and the jet parts at the back. But I will cut some slack here because it is a triple changer, so some compromises would have to be made somewhere. You can also rotate the turret and store the weapons like so. Transformation into jet mode isn't as good because unpegging the treads and the struts on which they're attached to make me worried that I might just break it. But the jet mode is pretty good. I appreciate how they were able to fold up the treads to make it as sleek as possible, and I like the integration of the headmaster and the weapon storage. If I were to throw some sort of complaint towards this jet, it would be the fact that the wings don't lock in. I feel like the Legacy figure would have definitely benefited from being an upgrade on this figure, or at least getting rid of this stupid tank dick that nobody asked for. I mean, seriously, Hasbro, you think you can just whip out the tank dick and we'll all enjoy it? At least buy me dinner first. Moving on to Astro Train, this may be an even bigger departure from his G1 model. Most of his body is a light gray that his face was in the show, especially noticeable when you cast your gaze at the Takara version with G1 accurate colors, or if you compare it to the Siege version. Both of them having their own level of stylization to be sure, but one of them is a little closer to what we remember. I also don't know if I'm the first one to point this out, but it looks like he's wearing tap shoes. I like his arm guns, but his legs are very long. And I also went to town on this guy with paint. The head sculpt is also noticeably different from his G1 model, like the eyes being smaller and the helmet being less conical. As for the backpack, it's alright. For weapons, he gets two rifles, with one of them having the seat for the headmaster, which is once again unpainted. And much like Blitzwing, he has spring-loaded pylons that can move a little. Speaking of moving, the head can swivel, shoulders can rotate, arms can move in and out, bicep swivel, the elbows can bend further than 90 degrees, no waist, legs can move forward and back, he can do the splits, thigh swivel, 90-degree knees, and you can use the transformation joint at his feet. Speaking of the transformation, this process is dirt simple. Straighten out the limbs, swivel the backpack, and flip out some panels. Hey, remember when Astr Train turned into a quaint little steam engine? Because here he turns into this big ass diesel train that looks like something I'd see in an apocalypse. Take a look at these doors. They're pretty small, so this thing would be absolutely massive if it were real. One thing I feel was missing was paint on the wheels, because these wheels didn't have it at all. One thing I rediscovered was this detail on the back that's definitely meant for this mode that you end up needing to cover up for the transformation. This thing also has wheels that don't work well. The cockpit for this mode is right here, and you can peg the guns in here or here. Transformation into shuttle mode is once again incredibly easy, especially if you're going from robot to shuttle or vice versa. And the shuttle mode is another thing that doesn't exist. And this thing is implied to be massive because of the cockpit, which is obviously not where the headmaster goes. And when you flip it over, you can see that this thing is not doing much to change into this. But this thing has landing gear you can flip out, but it doesn't really do much. And the guns can go several places on this craft. And finally, we have Octane, who for whatever reason is named Octone on the box. Yeah, no, I'm not calling him that.
What verbal diarrhea just came out of your mouth? Are you f***ing serious?
Anyway, robot mode. He looks pretty good from the front. He has a good color layout, and he's proportioned pretty well. But then you look at him from the side, and he ends up looking bloated. And this is because he also has a pop-up gimmick that I removed. Before this came out, Optimus got a Triple-Changer that was a retool of this mold. He had this gimmick, which were his antennae that didn't look right, and they especially didn't look good on this mold either. So now Octane is bloated to make room for a gimmick that no longer exists. That also makes it so the wings are on these assemblies that are jointed down here, and they do not stay where they're supposed to. There's a tab and a spot for them to go, but they won't stay. As for the head, it looks exactly like him. They didn't change anything, which makes me notice that Octane doesn't have as much sculpted detail as the other two. I think this is fine for the vehicle modes, which we'll get into later, but I feel they should have done something with the robot parts so he looks a little closer to the other two, because he stands out like you wouldn't believe. For accessories, he had a turret gun that I lost, and a rifle. For posability, the head can swivel, the arms can rotate once you adjust the pylons, arms can move out, bicep swivel, 89-degree elbows, inward wrists, no waist, legs can move forward and back, thigh swivel, 90-degree knees, and foot can point down. As for the transformation, it's a little iffy because you have to situate the tail wings in a specific way between the halves of the truck cab, but everything else is fine. And the tanker truck mode is pretty good, even if there are bits of kibble like the wings pointing out the back and the tail pointing out of the top of the cab. I also think the cab looks pretty funny with how it's clearly squished, but the paint on the nose is pretty well matched with the plastic of the cab. Obviously, since the cab becomes the arms, the headmaster can't go in the cab, and instead it goes into the tank, which sounds like some sort of torture. And the wheels roll pretty well too. The transformation into the passenger plane is easier, but a little bothersome with how you need to open up the panels on the tank in order to flip out the nose cone. And this is definitely the worst mode here because this thing looks pretty bad. The wings are too far back on the plane, and the tail looks pathetic, and the truck cab is very obvious. I guess you could use mental gymnastics to argue that these could be turbines, but then you'd look like a moron. And you can also peg the gun in like this. And overall, these figures are okay. It's fun to look back on older lines of Transformers every so often. These figures are very flawed, and the spring-loaded pylons were unnecessary, and that feature especially harms Octane, but you can have some fun transforming them, and they do at least have some cool factor to them. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and gotta zoom.